Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Wildrift video. Today we'll be going over Wildrift's patch 5.2a and checking out what's in store in the newest update. Let's begin. I have not checked out the update, so let's see who got buffed and nerfed this time around. I'll go ahead and just skip the unimportant stuff. I'm not much of an ARAM player, but this could be interesting with augments included, so I'll be sure to check it out when it releases. Alright, champion changes. Evelynn has been striking fear into the hearts of her enemies. We're tweaking her numbers to make sure she's still manageable as you face off against her in lanes and jungle alike. It looks like this is a nerf to Evelynn's burst damage. Not a massive nerf in my opinion. I believe Evelynn should still be capable of one-shotting squishies all the same. This just makes bursting down bruisers and tanks slightly harder, which I don't mind. And it's surely not because of my main tanks. Vi is getting a sizable buff to all her damaging abilities, most notably her passive, which is being increased by 21%, which is huge. Then she's getting a cooldown buff on her Q ability. Paired up with at least 50 ability haste, this puts the ability on a 4-second cooldown versus a 5-second cooldown pre-patch, which is insane mobility for her. Finally, she gets a slight increase in her early game damage, a small 11% damage increase. We should be seeing a lot more Vi players in the future. She may become more prevalent with this patch. Next up, we got another buff to everyone's favourite Void Reaver, Kha'zix, getting a major 18% damage buff to his early game, lowered to a small 6% buff when maxed out. I don't know how to feel about this change. I felt that Kha'zix was still fairly powerful in the early to mid game, and this not only boosts his overall burst potential, but also greatly increases his early game clear speeds. I'll have to play as and against Kha'zix to see how this will play out, because he's looking really dangerous with these changes. Talon is taking a big hit to his E ability, 50 to 35 and 80 to 65 on the initial hit. That's a 42% to 23% damage nerf. The returning damage gets slightly better at 50 to 60 and 170 to 180, but that's only a 20% to 5% buff, which is just an insane hit to Talon's initial and overall damage. The E nerf just makes it harder for him to escape, but his burst damage potential took a major dip. It'll be way harder to poke down the enemy in the early to mid-game. We'll just have to see how he holds up. Misfortune is getting a buff to her passive, and it's increasing by a whopping 18%, but what really caught my eye was the buff to her W ability. A 5 base increase at level 1 and 20 bonus movement speed at max level. This is crazy. 110 movement speed at max rank is so broken. Pair her up with a Youmuu's and she just passively has 510 plus movement speed at all times. This is going to be so toxic. I am not looking forward to this, not gonna lie. Tell me what you'll think about this in the comments down below. If you're enjoying the video so far, I'd appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribed. Over 90% of you guys that watch my videos aren't subscribed, so I'd greatly appreciate your support if you find yourself as a frequent visitor to the channel so you don't miss the next upload. Moving on, Samira is getting a substantial buff to her early game cooldowns. She's going to be blocking projectiles and having her safety tool much more frequently, and her ultimate is getting a major 40% damage buff, which is not bad and should make it a lot easier to secure kills with her ultimate now. Zed gets a big buff to his ratios, nothing else to say here. He's just going to do what he already does, far easier and far faster with the more AD he gets. Blitzcrank gets some small buffs, about 5 more AD and lower mana cost. Nothing about him will change, except being able to use your Q a bit more frequently. Irelia, like Blitz, gets some tiny buffs. Slightly more armor makes her tankier, and a 25% damage buff to her ult in the late game. I don't think these changes will shift her around anywhere. She's still incredibly busted in the right hands. Now this is what I like to see. A nerf to toxic AP Nautilus builds. Getting one shot by Nautilus is the worst feeling just because he forces you to buy a stasis or lose half your HP with a single ability. It was getting ridiculous. Good changes all around. Hecarim getting an unexpected nerf to his Q. I haven't played against many Hecarims, so I can't really say if this change was needed or not, so I'll just take their word for it. Lucian passive buff. Oh god, I don't know how I feel about this. Lucian is a DPS machine, and he already does crazy amounts of upfront damage in a single skill rotation. I never felt that he was underperforming, but what do I know? I just don't want Lucian to become the #1 meta pick again. I'd rather fight Caitlyn's 24/7 than Lucian one-tricks. Jarvan getting a small AD buff and a small buff to his E ability is not bad. That extra 2.5 seconds off his E should help his overall mobility and lockdown potential. I'm okay with that. Now that we are getting to gameplay changes, let's see what they did. Okay, so they're buffing the T-Hex. Yeah, not gonna lie, it was fairly underwhelming being inside of it. Its best ability was the shield, and outside of that, it was more of a nuisance than an actual threat. Now that it's jam-packed with some bonus utility, it should feel a lot better to play now. They nerfed the damage of Baron, and I can see why. The damage this thing was doing was crazy. If you didn't have your full team and were a squishy, you'd get blown up in just a few attacks. The Hextech turret is getting a buff, which is nice. This thing always felt useless after it destroyed the first turret, but now it'll actually continue to pressure a lane for longer before being destroyed. The rest is just some minor toolkit adjustments. Nothing too crazy. Let's get to the items. Riftmaker buff, 12 to 13%. Not bad, I don't mind. It will give some mages a bit more sustainment that they've been lacking. Liandry's Torment nerf, this will not be worth a first item pick anymore. And Blade of the Rusted King is getting some bonus AD, a core item for most champions, made a bit stronger. Can't be mad at that. Now this is big. Arcane Comet is getting a huge boost in its damage. Most champions can get like 20-30 stacks in a game that's 40-60 extra damage per proc. It's going to be much better now. I don't know if it'll be too strong. We'll just have to wait and see. And Coup de Grace going from 7 to 8% bonus damage. This will be big versus other squishies, and near unnoticeable versus tanks and bruisers as usual. Giant Slayer will still be better able to deal with them. And that's everything. Overall, not a bad patch. Some changes are more questionable than others, but it should be interesting to see how things turn out. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like and subscribe to stay in the loop for more Wildrift videos. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.